949, Person's Guys as People. Let's hear new music from Dead Boy, his latest Psychic Hotline EP. I'm going to let it play as I chat with David a bit. So here we have David Feeney of the UNKLE Collective in the studio. We're going to chat about the new show, a bit about the artist, a bit about himself, and how he got to do it is what he does. So yeah, stick around. It's going to be a good little chat, I do think. David Feeney, how are you?
I'm good, Ian. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, this is great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So you have a new show, which is at 613 Dundas. It's called Baker's Dozen. And what can you tell us a bit about that show?
Well, so this show, Baker's Dozen, is a new artist collective that is being developed in Old East Village. So that's at the corner of Adelaide and Dundas. So I'm helping them launch the gallery space there. It will be renovated, but for my purposes, we've left it a little rough, which is how I like to do shows. And so we opened last Thursday, and the show is up until July the 8th, and it features Thomas Ackerman, who is a painter, 45 years painting and making art from forest. We have Richard Sturgeon, who's a local sculptor, and I'm sure many people know Richard. And then we have a group called Three Radicals, which is a group that's making some very innovative sculptural paintings, I would describe them as.
Okay. Now, does UNKLE Collective, or do you mainly focus on, or attempt to focus mainly on local artists, or are you trying to expand, or what's your take on that?
My goal in starting the collective was to try to bring art sort of out of the gallery and try to create interesting venues for shows. I attend art shows and things like that, art fairs, and I thought that it would be a very interesting thing to do shows in a warehouse, for instance, or in some kind of alternate space rather than a gallery. And so I set about kind of gathering up artists that might be interested, and I had a number of artists approach me. I represent artists from Toronto, quite a few here in London. I have a very talented artist in Kingston, and kind of in and around there. So regional and local as well is what I'm doing at this point.
Okay. And you started UNKLE Collective when?
So we launched, our very first show was March of 2016. So it's just over 2 years at this point.
Okay.
So this current show, which is entitled Art Rat, is number 15.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So you're basically bi-monthly at this point?
Well, that's a little ambitious, but you know, every 2-3 months, I guess, is the way that it has been progressing. We have a show scheduled in Toronto in the fall, which is a solo show for Tom Ackerman, and that would be the second show that I've done in Toronto. So, you know, trying to kind of shake up the scene here in London, but also wanting to take some of these things to the Toronto area as well,
right,
and into a bigger market.
Okay. And so, who are some of the other local artists that you work with?
So I have Greg Benz. I'm sure that many people know Greg's work.
Right.
Brian Chesney and Dan Tamboro. Those are my I call them the original three because they were the ones that started with me. The very first show that I ever did included just those three guys.
Okay.
And of course Richard Sturgeon. And you know, I'm going to forget some names here, and so it'll be very embarrassing because I'll get a text from somebody saying, "Oh, you didn't mention me." Elzbieta Kowalska. I have to mention Elzbieta because, or Ella, as we know her. She's an amazing photographer who I met in Toronto at the Artist Project, which is a big art fair in Toronto, and she had never shown in London. So I helped her have her first show here. So I'm kind of proud of that, and I know that Ella has been very appreciative of that fact as well.
Right. So this current show, which is open until Sunday?
It's open till Sunday. We decided to do a closing night party, but we're going to do it tomorrow night.
Right.
Since Sunday night, doesn't really work for most people.
Right.
So we'll have a DJ and a bar and do all those good things that you do on an opening, but this will be sort of the winding down of the show. So the show has a group of artists called Free Radicals, and Free Radicals are, how do I describe them? They're a collective. They're anonymous, so any number of artists could be involved in the work that they're showing, but that work all falls under the Free Radical banner. Okay. It doesn't have any artist name attached. It's part of their mandate to do that. And the work is a little irreverent, and the work is challenging what we consider, what makes culture and what makes good art and all of those sorts of things. So some of it's cheeky, some of it's a little profound. Certain of the pieces in this show, we call them sculpt paintings because they're sculptural in nature, but they also come off the wall in many ways. And they're very, what's the word I'm looking for? They're very dynamic, I think, is the best word I can use to describe them.
Okay.
And I'm not seeing anything like it being done because of the material as well. And I guess that's the other thing that I want to stress is that oftentimes the process or the material an artist is working with is as important or sometimes more important than the actual image itself.
Certainly. So you're not particular about certain mediums. You kind of take all kind of things. Yeah,
I'm a bit of an abstractionist because that's what I collect myself, and that's where my interest lies. But in terms of the medium, no, I'm open to most things. I really am fond of painting, so that is certainly something that I gravitate to. However, one of my artists who I call him my minimalist now because he didn't really start out that way, but he has certainly moved in that direction, and he's doing amazing work, and that's Evan Ginsberg in Kingston. And Evan does remarkable work and has a bit of a following here in London. I've sold quite a few pieces on Evan's behalf here as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So if you're just tuning in, I have David Feeney of the UNKLE Collective. UNKLE Collective, they have a closing show tomorrow night at 613 Dundas, Baker's Dozen, up until Sunday. Now, we talked a bit about the art and a bit about the collective itself, but I'm curious, like I actually don't even really know, we've never really talked about it. What kind of inspired you to kick this off in the first place?
Well, again, you haven't asked until now.
Fair enough. That's true.
I have been a collector for many years myself, and I've always had a keen interest in art. I worked in a very different career out of university and worked in the not-for-profit sector, but had a background in the arts and have a couple of degrees in the arts, and so I was downsized and decided that 3 years ago I would make a career change and pursue my passion rather than the thing that was going to pay the bills monthly, but something I would be miserable in.
Right.
And so I pursued that, and I started this idea of doing pop-up events. So rather than having the overhead of a gallery and having to deal with all of that, I just moved from place to place. We're like nomads, trying, anywhere that'll have us, we'll set up and turn it into an art gallery for you.
Right.
So that's how things got started. And as I said, we launched a couple of years ago, and we're just chugging along, trying to shake things up in what sometimes can feel like sleepy London.
Right.
So that's kind of the mandate as well, is to shake up people's perception of what is art, what is a gallery,
sure.
What does it mean to experience art, and a bit of education as well. I think that's certainly something that I'm keen on, is trying to help people realize that they can own original art, that it's not out of their league, that they don't have to buy, the pretty flower from Walmart, or the dog with a tear in his eye from from HomeSense, so they can actually have a living, breathing piece of art on their wall.
Right. Not just dogs playing poker.
Not dogs playing poker, absolutely. Although if it was done in a tongue-in-cheek, maybe it would be interesting. I don't know.
Sure. Okay, now I'm curious, is this a collaborative thing, or is Uncle Collective essentially yourself and you see the day-to-day operations and you essentially look after curating it mostly?
That's the latter. It really is. It's kind of a one-man show.
Right.
Certainly input from the artists as well. But in terms of pulling the shows together and those sorts of things, yeah, I'm kind of it. I'm the full-time staff of this little venture.
So when you approach a venue, what is it that you look for in a space or a venue when you want to put these things together?
Walls, and walls. I really, and it's funny when you start doing this kind of work, you all of a sudden, you walk into somebody's home and you're kind of looking at how much wall space do they actually have. And so in terms of venues, first of all, I want it to be an interesting space. And so in 2016, I did a Nuit Blanche show at Bud Gowan Building on Clarence Street.
I remember that was a great show.
Yeah, in the lower level there. Very raw, very like old brick walls and old stone walls and that sort of thing. But we made it work, and it was very unique. So that's kind of what I look for. Don't get me wrong, if I hang in a space that's more gallery-like, that's a bit of a treat, because I'm not faced with the challenges of trying to figure out how do we hang things on these walls, or how do we light the show.
Right.
So, I've used Anderson's craft ales a number of times, and they're great to work with, and they let me do whatever I want on their walls, which is very generous of them, because we certainly are not shy about screwing things in. But when I'm looking for a space, like I say, it needs to be interesting. And if it's a little rough and it's a little downtrodden and it isn't, it's not really finished, that's even better, because that's outside of the gallery mystique, right? That nice clean white box that everybody associates with looking at art.
Right.
And that quite frankly, people are afraid sometimes to walk into, because people talk in quiet tones and it's all reverential.
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to break us away from that.
Well, I certainly enjoy it. So again, if you're just tuning in, David Feeney of the UNKLE Collective closing show happening tomorrow night, 613 Dundas, Baker's Dozen. So I'm not really familiar. I've never been. What's the story behind Baker's Dozen?
So this is a block, as you may or may not be aware, you probably are aware, Old East Village, so east of Adelaide, is in a bit of a renaissance. And there's a real resurgence going on, lots of arts bubbling up down there, because it's affordable, although how much longer it remains affordable is in question as people start to flock down there. And so a gentleman by the name of William Older purchased the block called Lily's Corners, and it's at Adelaide and Dundas, and is turning that into an artist hub. So he has already put in some little pods that are kind of like little studios for artisans, and he's open on Saturdays to bring people down to check out some of those sorts of things. And then there's this space, and so I love the fact that I'm occupying a space that was a pawn shop. Like we're talking literally a month and a half ago.
Is that right?
It literally was a pawn shop just before I moved the show in. And so it's of course all been cleaned out. It is going to be a gallery space of some description, with maybe a storefront as well down the road. William has some ideas around that. But we're helping him launch it. And UNKLE Collective is there certainly to bring awareness to the area, so then to bring people down. And all these villages, like I said, we're experiencing another renaissance down there, and so there's lots going on in terms of the arts, in terms of food culture down there is amazing. There's great stuff going on, and so this is just another facet of that.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of fascinating to see all that stuff pop up. I mean, you have the root cellar, you have all these new cafes, you have butchers, you have cheese outlets, you have
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
barber shop now.
Yeah, we do have a barber shop.
Yeah.
Not
So
that you would really need it in, but we.
I go to the barber every 2 weeks. I live with the barbers. I say, give me the Drake. So what's next? She said there's another show happening in August, but it's not in London.
No, I've got I haven't got anything set for London at this point. I do have though a show set up for Toronto.
Okay.
And so I'm doing a show with Thomas Ackerman in Toronto at Gallery 1313, which is Queen West.
Okay.
And that opens, I believe it's the 25th of October. And that's going to be a series of work that's not been seen before. Tom's never shown this work. It's called Apostle Astronauts.
Okay.
And they're magnificent. And so if you follow me on social media at all, you'll start to see that I've already put some of this work up on Instagram and kind of all the usual suspects.
Okay.
So we're looking forward to that show, and that show will run for about 2 weeks. The only other show I have scheduled for London right now is, of course, I do a holiday show at Anderson's,
right.
and that is in December.
So you'll have both Jake and I at that, obviously.
Exactly. I know my audience.
You do, yeah.
And so I will have some other shows in London over the next little while. Sometimes I have them mapped out well in advance, and other times the opportunity arises, the space is available, and I just do it. It's there. So.
Well, we don't want to alienate anyone, and we don't want to sort of call people out in particular, but if you had to kind of pick your favorite venue thus far, which one would it be?
Oh no, this is I'm supposed to say my current venue. Come on,
that's right,
Ian. That's not good to call me out on. Let me put it this way: the space that was, first of all, the most challenging, but secondly, the most interesting to work in was the Bud Gellin building.
Right.
It was empty. The basement was smelly and just had to be cleaned up a bit. We had concrete walls that we had to drill holes into, but it was great. It was a great venue, and that's what I look for. And so, if anybody's listening and they know some great venues that deserve an art show, don't be afraid to be in touch.
Well, that's a good idea. How can people find your work, and how do they get a hold of you if they want to?
So I have a website. It's UNKLE Collective, and it's Uncle with a K, UNKLE-COLLECTIVE.com.
Right.
And that site actually is being redone, so that should relaunch. It's currently up, but a new site will be probably coming up in the next few weeks. And then, of course, Instagram,
right.
And that's UNKLE Collect. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook. I post a fair amount, Twitter. So yeah, all of those ways. Or you can contact me directly, and it's David@UNKLECOLLECTIVE.com.
Okay. Oh, that reminds me. When you mentioned the K, what's the significance with Uncle?
I get this question occasionally. So I have family in Toronto. I spend a fair amount of time in Toronto going to the film festival and cultural events and art galleries and things like that,
right.
with my niece. And everybody in Toronto in her circle knows me as Uncle David. And so it was suggested that perhaps this would be a good name for the collective. And so we just cheekily changed the C into a K. And that really is how it came about. Now, I'm also aware that apparently there's a band out there called Uncle.
Yeah, DJ Shadow and another fella, yeah.
Yeah, so, well.
James Lavelle.
There you go. I didn't know that prior to doing this. So.
No, it's a good reference. I mean, there could be a lot, stranger things to be aligned with.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so I've been chatting with David Feeney of UNKLE Collective. As mentioned, 613 Dundas, which is the Baker's Dozen. Closing party tomorrow night, which is free and licensed. Is that right?
It is. Yep.
Okay, so you can get a drink on. It's a Friday night after all. And the show officially closes on Sunday. So do check it out. You got a couple of days yet to go check it out. And keep an eye on Collective, social media, all that good stuff. David, thanks for coming in, man.
Thanks, Ian. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. So do stick with, gonna play some Dead Boy to play out the last half hour, and as I mentioned, got some Daedalus in the last half up until 3:30, with potentially playing with How to Trek if I have time. We'll see. Keep it locked, 94.9 CHW Radio Western.